Hello, my name is Paul Roberts. I'm the Managing Director of Predictive Discovery Limited. We're a gold exploration company that's been operating in Guinea for the last 2 years. We've made a large discovery in what's known as the Sagiri Basin, and we're driving that project forward towards development. We've recently issued a maiden resource estimate, a large maiden resource estimate, and metallurgical test work, and we're pushing forward with exploration.
Paul, good to see you again. I haven't seen you since March. You've been quite busy, very busy, which is why I wanted to talk to you. Congratulations on maiden resource, a large resource indeed. Why on earth did you go for that sort of stuff? You could have put one out a lot sooner, couldn't you?
In reality, I don't think we could have. We certainly promised the market that we were going to put one out in the September quarter, and which we did on the last day, admittedly, of the September quarter. But really what's been happening is that as we've been drilling deeper, we've been finding more. And indeed, as we've got to the bottom or the lower part of the deposit, as we know it now, the grade has gone up. And so obviously the temptation is to keep on going, but at the same time, you have to honour the promises you make to your shareholders. And as a consequence, we allowed ourselves to drill as long as possible. We found more. We did, in fact, include some holes that initially we weren't going to include in the resource, simply because there were very good results, and as a consequence, particularly with that deeper additional ounces, we surprised the market. And certainly when you're putting out a maiden resource estimate, it's a really good idea to surprise the market on the upside, which is what we managed to do.
Well, you definitely surprised the market. Your share price went shooting up in no short order. Look, and for people watching this, we spoke back in March. I'll put a link below to the interview back then. We talked about the business model, the strategy, the team, and all of those wonderful things that you need to know about a company before you invest. So go look at that. Today, I want to focus on a few things. Obviously, the maiden resource. I think the clues were there. Back in May, after we spoke, you went and raised some, $20+ million, and you said, you gave us the clue, this is going to be allocated towards drilling. So that's exactly what you did. So tell us, what did you know back in May before you drilled? Why did you go so aggressively with the amount of money that you raised?
It's simply because we already knew it was sitting on a large deposit. Now, of course, the deposit has surprised us in a very good way, but we were certainly looking at a large, very well configured, bulk mineable gold deposit, and we knew that there was a real opportunity to expand it, not only to expand the deposit, to expand Bankang Creek, which is 3 kilometres away, and to explore more regionally. And of course, we've done all of those things, and we've had encouragement in all of those areas. So we were excited. Certainly the shareholders were excited, the investors were excited in the opportunity here. What's happened is, of course, that we've exceeded the optimistic expectations with something which is even better than we thought.
So what next, though? Because that's a huge resource. Do you do the Aussie thing of just let's get into the various studies that we need to do, get some economics on this thing, and then make it ready for someone else to take over? Or is it more drilling that we're expecting to see?
Well, we need to unpack that a bit. I mean, firstly, the question is whether we're sort of readying it to take over, and the answer is we're not readying it for takeover. We're actually driving this forward so that it can be a really big, profitable gold mine, and if that's at all possible for us to do it ourselves, we will do it ourselves. So we're driving towards development. In terms of doing extra drilling, as opposed to the question of whether we sort of infill what we've got, right now, there's so much possibility. We keep on finding indications of really interesting things on the ground, and obviously we need to find out more of those things. I mean, right now we're talking about a 3.65 million ounce gold deposit. Obviously, the complexion of the project changes if we push it up to 5 or 6 million ounces, or possibly even larger than that. Clearly, we're talking about a much larger gold mining operation, and if it looks as if it's going to be that much larger, then we have to think about doing the work to eventually, when we get to do a study which will actually encompass the scale of it. So firstly, the question is, what is the scale of this thing? We don't fully understand it, and so we're drilling more, but we're not drilling more with the intention of packaging it up to sell. We're purely doing it so that we can actually develop a bigger mine.
Right, but different companies employ different models. Typically, the Aussies like to ready something to get into production, whether it's yourself or someone else, in this case, yourselves, because it gets cash flowing, because it's of a scale already. You've done some met work, and I would love to talk about that in a second. Or the North American model, which is they just kind of drill out till they find the edges of the resource. Okay, so those are sort of two models, which are generally speaking, and I'm trying to understand what you think your options are and how you would proceed with this.
Well, in truth, I think it's a bit of both. So certainly we have to keep on exploring and expanding the deposits and the opportunity. But at the same time, obviously, we need to be thinking about economics. I mean, one of the important restrictions that you have when you're on the ASX is that if you're going to put out a feasibility study, or a scoping study for that matter, not that we're planning to do a scoping study, then you've got to drill out your resources to 75% indicated or above. Now, and that involves an awful lot of drilling. We can do a lot of work internally to understand this before going to that step. So for sure, we're doing a bit of infill drilling now. We're going to report some in the next few weeks. So there is a bit of that going on. But there's going to be a focus, certainly in the near term, of looking for more. There's so much low-hanging fruit to grab. We need to go and grab it, and we'll carry on with internal studies to start evaluating the economics.
Absolutely. Look, you raised some money in May. I don't know what your cash position is at the moment. Could you tell me? Do you know?
24.
Right. Okay. So you got a lot of money, and I guess a long runway as to how you allocate that. But at some point, you'll be needing to get out to market to raise some additional capital at some point in the distant future. What are the things that you think the markets would react to? The fact that you've kind of built out the potential size of the resource, or is that a lot more about the extent of what you're seeing underground through step out drilling, etc.
Well, certainly, I think that we can see that the market reacts to new discovery, and that is not going to change. And so keeping, if you like, filling the pipeline with new discovery is something that we need to do, and the market is going to look for. Other sectors of the market will also be interested to know whether we're increasing confidence with the deposits, and therefore, obviously, that means we'll do some work in that space. In terms of when we make that switch, if you like, for being more in discovery mode to more in evaluation mode, that's not a question. I mean, we're in a hurry here. We're not talking about going slowly, but exactly when we flip the switch and move towards that, that's not something that I'm too confident about predicting right now, because we really don't know how much we're going to find. I mean, if this ends up being a super tier 1 gold system that we've got, I think probably the market will want to know that it's a super tier 1 gold system that we've got, and it probably behoves us to do more drilling to determine that.
Okay, and so how are you allocating the cash that you've got at the moment in terms of the drilling? Where are you looking? Obviously, you put a few Bancan numbers out there, but there's a bit more to what your asset base. So, what do you want to kind of go and have a look at in terms of the exploratory component? Right.
So first, it's important to recognise that we're still at the back end of the rainy season. We're probably in the last month of heavy rain now. So we've had 2 multi-purpose rigs drilling deeper holes and some infill on Northeast Bancan. Now, at Northeast
during
Bancan...
During rainy season?
Absolutely.
Wow, okay. How was that? Any problems?
Well, not too many problems, no. But one of the reasons for that is that we're operating in a confined space where the access is quite good. So that's one of the reasons why it's a bit more difficult to run a lot of drill rigs at the same time. But we've got those 2 rigs. They're drilling the deeper holes. They're currently both drilling holes which are about 650 metres. They're drilling about 50 metres below the level of where we've ever got results before. And what we're doing is we're exploring with those holes this lobe of high grade that we can see. So in the bottom 100 metres of the resource, in the high grade, not in the surrounding low grade material, so this is the plus 3 gram material, we had 500,000 ounces. So that's 5,000 ounces per vertical metre of material that's almost certainly going to be underground mineable. You're talking about a true width of maybe of the order of 30 metres. You're talking about an average grade of 7 grams. You're talking about a strike length of 100 or 200 metres. This material is a beautiful underground mining operation. So you go down another 100 metres, potentially there's another 500,000 ounces. You go down 200 metres, potentially there's 1 million ounces. Obviously, we need to find out more about that. So we're drilling deeper holes with that. We're doing it now. We'll continue to do that. Down at Bankan Creek, we'll also do some additional drilling because we haven't got to the end of that system. We didn't drill it as deep as we did Northeast Bankan. Might takes a little while to get to that though, because it's a relatively small part of the whole resource inventory. And then regionally, we're getting more results. So 1.5 kilometres away, just 10 days ago, we put out one of the air core holes. We've just started doing air core drilling on the property again during the rainy season, and the best hole was, included several intercepts, including 28 metres of 12 grams, not shabby. And certainly there's potential as we go along strike, or more or less to the north of that. We're getting other little intercepts in the air core. Potentially there's another zone. We don't know how continuous it is. We don't know very much about it. Plainly, we need to find out more about that. In the first instance, we go back and do some more air core drilling there. Then up in the north, we've yet to follow up 12 metres of nearly 10 gram hit, which was up on this new structure. To the northeast of that, we've got a zone which is 1 kilometre long with a different style of mineralisation, which we've done some air core drilling in as well. So we're waiting for results for that. So we've got, they're just the sort of obvious things to talk about. There are other places which require follow up across the property package. So plainly, we're following that up with the air core. There's just a single air core rig right now, paddling around and testing those targets. Obviously, as we get out of the rainy season to the dry season, we need to probably add in some additional assets and go and test them with deeper drilling. So deeper northeast Bankan, going to do some work on Bankan Creek, regional targets, doing shallow air core, go into deeper drilling with RC. Probably on anything that's interesting, we'll bang in a few diamond drill holes just to get an idea of whether it's got roots.
I mean, the grades are phenomenal. I mean, is that kind of typical for Sigiri?
No, it's interesting, but geologically it's a bit different. So, in fact, this whole area is probably a little bit high grade, not just where we are, but Hummingbird to the east of us have got a high grade deposit. I don't think, although we don't have publishable data, what's going on with this private company called Sycamore to the south of us, I don't think that's particularly low grade. When you get out into the Sigiri Basin, you look at Sigiri itself, you look at Leifa, then the grades are close to 1 gram. But indeed, this material, the intrinsic grade is clearly higher.
Yeah, it's interesting. We looked at a project some 3 years ago, and it was much, much lower. So you've stumbled across something quite nice there. Just on the met work, then, I know you put out an announcement about that. The recoveries seem pretty solid. You pleased?
Very pleased, very pleased. Yes, I mean, we knew that it was a relatively fine gold system. We've done a lot of petrology, but, you don't pan nuggets of gold out of this thing. It's one of the reasons why there were next to no artisanal miners working on it when we turned up, because it's just too difficult for them. However, it's the truth is the grain size is fine enough to deter the artisanal miners, but plenty good enough for us to use a conventional mill setup on it. So that's very, very pleasing. 94.2 to 98.5% recoveries in 24 hours. You really you couldn't wish for more. The ore's a little bit hard, but we've actually got options to manage that as well, to manage your energy costs.
Right. So you got the maiden resource out. When will you put the next resource out? An update?
Certainly. Well, I'm expecting to put out a resource update in the first half of next year. Exactly when that comes through will really depend on results and how easy it is to string these things together. I mean, the great thing about Bangkang Creek, and one of the reasons why we've got to a resource after only 17 months from announcing discovery, is Northeast Bangkang, because Northeast Bangkang, very continuous ore body. You can plug holes 80 meters apart, and you can knit it all together because it just joins up. So if we find more of that style of mineralisation, well, then we'll push forward more rapidly than if we got something which is a bit more veiny.
And
it remains to be seen.
And how do you think the Australian market? I mean, what's the shareholder profile look like in terms of share registry?
Well, we've got an increasing number of institutional investors on our books. So we're certainly north of 20% now, sort of in the probably getting close to 30%. Of institutional investors, a lot of them from the Northern Hemisphere, interestingly, and obviously we've got a good group of loyal high net worth investors, and then the rest is smaller retail.
Right, and do you find that I just want to talk about the registry for a bit, because I noticed the Northern Hemisphere influence, but the Aussie retail seem to be comfortable with the model that you're employing, but it's an Africa story. Do you think do you suffer a little bit for being an African story, given what we've seen with the Aussie gold miners this year, in the last 12 months, I should say?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in general everyone would agree that there's a West African discount, and that if this deposit had been found in Australia, because it's perfect for open pit mining. It's a good grade. It's got high grade at the bottom. I mean, there's nothing you can't like about it. Then obviously our market cap would be higher. But nonetheless, it is pleasing that when you put out a good result like we have here, that you get appreciation from the Australian stock market, and we certainly have had that.
And so let's bounce up to the Northern Hemisphere, because they're more used to an African story. So your ASX at the moment, any thoughts about maybe coming to either London or Frankfurt just to kind of get a little bit more exposure to that money?
It's a dual list. We haven't given that any serious consideration. I mean, it's very easy to be listed on Frankfurt. You really don't have to do very much at all. In fact, it's organised by a broker. Obviously, listing on AIM is more onerous, and I don't think that we feel that we're ready to go and do that. That possibility may arise. Obviously, dual listing isn't just the possibility isn't just London. There's always the possibility of TSXV. But right now, I think that we're getting pretty good support in Australia, and indeed, the big fund investors over in North America are obviously comfortable investing on ASX listed stocks.
Yeah. So obviously, I think it sounds like more exploration, more of trying to work out the scale of what you've got here. At some point, you're going to probably start thinking about who's on the team and what they're capable of, are you?
Certainly, and we're already doing that. And so, there's and we talked about this 6 months ago that we need to go through a transformation. Obviously, we made changes to the board at about that time. We're looking we're in the throes of recruiting several key personnel to help bolster our capability. And indeed, that's a process that we'll continue to do over the next months and certainly over the next year. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that there's actually quite a lot you can do when you're based in Perth, particularly with, if you like, sort of an outside-in approach. So in terms of if you're doing studies of different kinds, this is one of the best places in the world, in my opinion at least, to call on the great strength of the consultancy groups here to do work. So it isn't an automatic requirement that you've got to build the whole project team internally. There's plenty of capability here to help us with that. So we have the luxury of certainly moving that direction, but not necessarily as you might in some other jurisdictions. You might find that you actually want quite a large team and a large office full of people, but I don't think that that's immediately necessary.
Right. And so just in terms of the research, I just want to understand a little bit of the potential of how the scale built out. So how many drill holes went into this maiden resource and how many additional holes didn't make it or didn't make it into the assays were late or whatever, for whatever reason they weren't included?
In fact, all but one hole ended up in this resource. So we decided to add in the lowermost line of holes. We had two. So that was included in, and then there was the last one. We actually published them at the same time, but the first two results came a bit earlier, and so the last one missed the cut. Although very reassuringly, that last one, which was between those two holes, was essentially the sort of an intermediate amount of gold and an intermediate grade. So the model was clearly working. But so we got very little. That of course is within Northeast Bankan. Bankan Creek we closed the line on quite a while ago. Nothing's been included from the regional, obviously, because we haven't done enough drilling.
Yeah, no, I'm sort of intrigued as to, you talked about, first half next year for the next resources. It's not the amount of meters, it's, I guess, where those meters are going to be drilled and the type of answers that you would include in the next resource that I'm sort of intrigued by. Have you kind of got a plan in terms of where you want it to come from? Because I guess there's some easy answers and there's going to be some more interesting answers.
Well, I mean, obviously we are very much hoping there's going to be a significant addition from Northeast Bankan itself, and there will be a probably more modest addition just because of the scale of the system from Bankan Creek, but plainly we're looking to get resources to go from where we are, which is with some air core results and some auger results, to actually to go to something which we've drilled off sufficiently that we can include that at least in the inferred resource level. So we are hoping across the package, there's a number of possibilities, that one or two of those possibilities are going to come through, and we're going to add resources from that shallower ounces, I would think, in the first instance.
Right. Okay. Well, look, interesting times and very exciting times for you. Some great drill results coming out, and want to hear more from you more often. Quite frankly, things are going well.
They're going very well. Yeah. Thanks very much, Matt.